Gopasayam Kund, Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Mathuradam Ki Jai, Jagadata Swami Ki Jai, Himanamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Lasadevi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we'll continue with our discussion of Lord Ram's pastimes and the pastimes of different personalities connected with Lord Ram. So we're going to start reading from the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th chapter, text 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll just read this text and we'll go into the word-by-word synonyms. Urvarate tyatva rajo vyacharad anuvaram padma padhyam priyayaha panisparshat shamabhyam Rijita Patarujo Yo Harindranujavyam Vairupyach Churpanakya Priya Viraharusha Ropita Bru Vishrimba Trastad Birbada Setu Kala Davadana Koshalendro Vatangnaha. So, all right, the word-by-word synonyms. Guru Arte, for the sake of keeping the promise of his father. Jaktadrajaha, giving up the position of king. Avyacharat, wandered, anuvanam, from one forest to another. Padma padyam, by his 2 lotus feet. Priyaha, with his very dear wife, Mother Sita. Panisparsha akshamabhyam, which were so delicate that they were unable to bear even the touch of Sita's palm. Rijitapatarushaha, whose fatigue due to walking on the street was diminished. Yaha, the Lord who? Harindra Anujabhyam, accompanied by the king of the monkeys, Hanuman, and his younger brother, Lakshmana. Vairupyat, because of being disfigured. Surpanakyaha, of the Rakshasi demoness, named Shurpanaka. Priya Viraha, being aggrieved by separation from his very dear wife. Arusha Aropita Bru Vishrimba, by flickering of his raised eyebrows in anger. Trasta, fearing. Adibihi, the ocean. But a say to who? One who constructed a bridge over the ocean. Kaladava Dahanaha, killer of envious persons like Ravan, like a fire devouring a forest. Kosa Indraha, the king of Ayodhya, Avatat, be pleased to protect. Naha, us. Translation: to keep the promise of his father intact, Lord Ramchandra immediately gave up the position of king and, accompanied by his wife, Mother Sita, wandered from one forest to another on his lotus feet, which were so delicate that they were unable to bear even the touch of Sita's palms. The Lord was also accompanied by Hanuman, or by another monkey, Sugriva, king of the monkeys, and by his own younger brother, Lord Lakshman, both of whom gave him relief from the fatigue of wandering in the forest. Having cut off the nose and ears of Shurpanaka, thus disfiguring her, the Lord was separated from Mother Sita. He therefore became angry, moving his eyebrows, and thus frightened the ocean, who then allowed the Lord to construct a bridge to cross the ocean. Subsequently, the Lord entered the kingdom of Ravana to kill him like a fire devouring the forest. May that Supreme Lord Ramachandra give us all protection. Pretty blissful verse. That's actually a verse you can chant for protection from Lord Ramchandra. It's from the Bhagavatam, which is the most authentic literature. So, we'll speak a little bit about the Lord's pastimes. Yesterday, we sort of left off in the middle of my friend Ravan. So I was feeling great separation. Anyway, so we were talking about how Ravan got cursed, and how Ravan even got cursed by Parvati, Ravan got cursed by Nandi, Ravan got cursed by Vedavati, Ravan got cursed by Nalakuvara. Remember, we talked about that yesterday. Okay. So, okay. So, I think that's all we'll talk about Ravana. So one thing I want to talk about today was in relationship to this verse in the Bhagavatam that we just read. That it's very important lessons that one can learn from the Ramayan that apply to us. Of course, Prabhupada did say, there's several different things that, externally Prabhupada said that the rascals in society have tried to kidnap Sita or Lakshmi. It's a typical thing Prabhupada would say. And because they've kidnapped or tried to kidnap Lakshmi, or tried to have Lakshmi, this is the modern day right now we're talking about, the modern day Ravanas. Because they've tried to get Lakshmi, instead they get Maya Sita, who is Durga. That's one thing Prabhupada said. And then he also said, it is our duty to get back Lakshmi for Ram. That's another thing Prabhupada said. To bring back what belongs to Krishna. As Krishna, as it stated in the Upanishad, Ishavasham Vidam Sarvam, Yatkincha Jagajaga Tena Chiktena Bunjita, Madhurita, Kashasvidanam. Everything is owned and controlled by the Supreme Lord. And whatever we have, or whatever anyone has just been lent by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It doesn't belong to them. Nirmana Mohat. In other words, nothing belongs to us. And so it's our business to bring everything back to the lotus feet. We're actually in the position of Hanuman. And actually, Prabhupada compared sometimes his disciples to Hanuman. Sometimes he compared them in a let's say in a negative way, he said, you're big, big monkeys, big, big belly, sail on jumping melancholy. In other words, you're making a big deal, a big scene, and you're not doing anything. So that was a negative way. But in a positive way, Prabhupada said that we have to be like Hanuman, bringing things back to Ram. So that's one thing that Prabhupada commented on about the Ramayan. Another point that Prabhupada didn't specifically talk about, but a lesson that we can learn from the Ramayan, just mentioned in the verse that we just read from Srimad Bhagavatam, is the loyalty and devotion that was there in the culture. And the first thing that's mentioned is Ram was very devoted to his gurus. Of course, he had two gurus that he was very much devoted to. One was his initiating spiritual master, which was Vasishtha Muni. That was his Kula guru, his family guru. And then there was Vishwamitra, who he was very devoted to too. So, and apart from that, of course, we could talk about Guru Bhakti or Guru Seva. So apart from that, we can see the relationships in society were very much one of devotion and loyalty. For example, you have Lakshman, who served Ram in such a menial way. He was the younger brother, of course, of Ram, that even, we mentioned the other day, he didn't even eat the whole time he was in the forest with Ram, because why? He didn't get asked to eat. Actually, there's some story that Ram gave him something to eat, but Ram didn't tell him to eat it. Something like, there was one story, one devotee told that Ram gave him like one nut or one fruit a day, and then when he was finished with all the years of exile in the Dandakaranya forest and serving Ram, he saw that there was a whole pile of fruit and he never ate it. And the reason he never ate it because he never got told to eat it by Ram. I mean, that's how much devotion. I mean, whether that story is true or not, it's not in the Valmiki Ramayan, don't worry. You don't have to do that with your guru. Actually, originally the tradition is, when the brahmacharis were trained by the guru, they didn't eat unless they were told to eat by the spiritual master. That's brahmacharis. So, there's no brahmacharis here, so you don't have to worry about that particular injunction. But that's the loyalty, the dedication, the devotion. And so you have Hanuman, who's dedicated not only to Ram, but he's dedicated to Sugriva because he was the disciple of the sun god. There's an interesting story about that Hanuman was told to take initiation and instruction from the sun god, and he flew backwards as he was taking instruction from the sun god, because the sun god's always moving. And what happened is the sun god said, for Guru Dakshin, you should always take care of Sugriva, my son. So then why, all right, we can tell a story within a story. So why is Sugriva considered the sun god's son? And why isn't Bali considered the sun god's son? So let's tell the story about that. That's an interesting story. So once upon a time, many millions of years ago, the sun had to take a vacation. Normally the sun doesn't take a vacation because it's going round, 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 round. And if it took a vacation, we'd be in trouble. Anyway, there'd be global cooling instead of global warming. So the sun had to take a vacation. This is an interesting story. The sun had to take a vacation because there was one lady who caused the sun to stop because she was trying to save her husband. I'm not going to get into the whole story. Husband was cursed by Markandeya Rishi to die before the sun rose. And she said, the sun's not going to rise. All right? And she prevented the sun from rising. And so the sun god had a little vacation. And so not only did the sun god have a little vacation, but Aruna, the sort of driver, the charioteer of the sun god, he also got a vacation. And so the sun god said, you can take a few days off, or whatever, a few minutes off. So he thought, on my vacation, Just like some of you on your vacation, you want to go see a Bollywood movie. So in the heavenly planets, they have, not Bollywood movies, but they have dances of the Apsaras. That's their version of Bollywood. Anyway, it's a lot nicer, I tell you that. Not that I know, but I do know, but I've never seen. And I don't want to see. So anyway, Aruna thought, let me go and see the dancing of these Heavenly Society girls. I never get a chance to go. I don't even get my 2 weeks or maternity or paternity leave or anything like they have. So anyway, so he goes to Indra's palace, and there's the dancing going on, ching, 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 ching. And so, most of you have not heard this story. And so then what they do is there's someone who blocks, because he's not a usual attendee. Just like in the bars, they have a bouncer who doesn't let people come in or throws people out. So he was blocked from coming in. And they said, you can't come in. And he thought, I want to come in. So because he was a very powerful personality, he had the ability to change his form. So he Aruna changed his form into one of the dancing girls. Aruni. Interesting. So he changed his form to one of the dancing girls. And then he showed up at the door and he said, I'm one of the dancers. I came a little late. Sorry about that. And so they let her or him in. So we think we're modern, we're talking about sex change nowadays. Well, they used to do it all the time. Nothing wrong. Wait a second. Don't do it. Anyway, so Prabhupada actually was very liberal. There was one boy who came one day as a girl to the temple, and the next day as a boy. And Prabhupada didn't chastise him for it. Prabhupada just said, pick one and stick to it. Don't change every day, So, okay. Prabhupada was liberal, It's not that he was super strict, very liberal. So anyway, so she goes in, or he goes in, to the dancing, and because he is the charioteer of the sun, quite a brilliant girl, effulgent, you pick up the effulgence after a while. So he goes in, and Indra sees this girl, and he ignores all the other dancing girls. And he says, show's over. Everybody out except for you. And so this girl's there, or this boy is there. It's hard to figure it out. Anyway, so Aruni is there, and Indra says, you're mine. And Aruni says, you don't understand. I'm actually Aruna. And Indra says, it doesn't matter. He's attracted. Indra has this problem. He's not really a brahmachari. He sees Ahalya, and he takes the form of Gautama Rishi. You know the story? He takes the form of Gautama Rishi. Then he gets cursed, and he has to get a transplant. Anyway, that's a whole other story. And that's in the Bhagavatam, actually. So then, anyway, somehow or other, they have a child. And that child is Bali. Interesting, isn't it? And then Aruna goes back, because it's time to go back to work. And the sun god says, where were you? And Aruna says, he's in the male form now. He says, you'd never believe it. I'm not going to tell you. And then the sun god, naturally, if you hear someone say, I'm not going to tell you, you'd never believe it, what do? You insist. You've got to tell me. I'm your guru. Then some people come to me and say, Guru Maharaj, I can't really, this is a secret. And then they impose my authority, and I say, I'm your guru, you have to tell me. Because it's so attractive, a secret is very attractive. I promise not to tell anybody. That's all right. I'm your guru. So anyway, so the sun god says, I want to see that form. And Aruna says, oh my God, here we go again. And so he puts on his form of Aruni, and guess what? Sugriva's born. So that's really the story of Sugriva's birth and Bali's birth, and how they were brothers, but they're actually half-brothers, with different fathers. And that's why Bali was stronger than Sugriva, because Bali was the son of Indra, whereas Sugriva was the son of the sun god. All right. And so Hanuman was serving him the whole time. So anyway, so that's one interesting story. But what I was talking about was the loyalty that people had, or monkeys had, or Rakshasas had towards each other. I mean, even look at Lakshmana's loyalty, Sita's loyalty towards Ram, and we mentioned before Urmila's loyalty towards Lakshman. She was told not to cry during the whole time they were away. She didn't cry. And the loyalty of Mandodari to Ravan. Even though she disagreed with Ravan and she was preaching to Ravan to give Sita back, still, she didn't just get a divorce. That's why you have to be careful who you marry. There's no question of divorce, so even if you marry a Rakshasa, you have to stay with him. So someone just wrote me a letter yesterday saying, what's wrong with marrying a non-devotee? And, practically, the thought may be, if it doesn't work out, we could, this is modern age. We can just I can just find someone else. But that's not Dharma. Dharma means even if you marry Ravan, you got to stick with him. So that's why you have to be careful who you marry, girls. Don't marry Ravan. And anyway, and then you get to preach to him. Anyway, if you marry him, you can preach to him. But then you got to support him. So anyway, so you see Mandodari is very, very loyal. And then what to speak of Kumbhakarna? Kumbhakarna, his loyalty was so much that he knew that he was going to get killed. And yet he decided not to defy the order of his brother Ravan. So then you may question, what about Vibhishan? Why wasn't Vibhishan loyal to Ravan, right? He should have just stayed with Ravan and been a nice demon. No, because he understood a higher principle. It's really interesting. There's higher principles and lower principles. And he was ultimately a devotee of Ram. And ultimately he understood that to save Ravan, which he tried to do, much like Vidura tried to save his brother, right? You know the story in the Mahabharata? That Vidura, he tried to save Dhritarashtra by preaching to him, and when it didn't work, he just ran away. In the same way, Vibhishan understood the best way to save Ravan was to have Ram defeat him. Because if Ram killed Ravan, Ravan would be free of all sinful reactions, especially the reaction from kidnapping Sita Devi. Just like you have this thing called capital punishment. Anyone heard of capital punishment before? Capital punishment means that if the state condemns a murderer, I'm not saying for ordinary crime, but condemns a murderer. Let's say there's a murderer, and you kill the murderer. The king, not the ordinary citizens, kills the murderer. Then, in many countries, it's considered exceedingly cruel. Just like here in Fiji, you don't have capital punishment, do you? No. But Prabhupada explains that the reason for capital punishment is to benefit the person who's killed. Kill the other person. Because if you killed someone, guess what? You get karma. And if there is capital punishment, then you get rid of that karma. I mean, that's one way. Of course, it's better to chant Hare Krishna, but that's my method. But you get rid of the karma. And also, you take the person out of circulation so he's not going to kill someone else. But people are very sentimental. Why are they very sentimental about this capital punishment thing? Because they think there's only one life. And if you kill someone, that's it. They're finished. But we understand if someone dies, they're not finished. Of course, this capital punishment is only for the government. And so Ram was the government. Like Ram also killed Bali. When you had the whole fight, of course, that's another story in the Ramayan. Ram said to Sugriva, you go challenge your brother. And Sugriva went to the outskirts of Kishkinda. He was originally at Mount Rishimukh. Of course, on that mountain he was protected because the sage had actually cursed Bali that if he came with bear he would die because he kicked he threw away this demon Dundubi, and the demon bled on the sage. You know the story? And so, anyway, so Sugriva was safe on the mountain. But Ram said, you go challenge Bali at the gates of Kishkinda. So what happened is that Sugriva challenged him, and Ram said, I'll be behind the tree, and I'll kill Bali. So one may think that that's not dharmic. But the king has the duty to chastise the miscreants. It's not like a fight. So anyway, so what happened is the first time they were fighting, Ram couldn't tell the difference between Bali and Sugriva. Because they were brothers, half-brothers, we told the story. They looked very similar. So Sugriva came back and said to Ram, I thought you were going to protect me. You know, you're supposed to always keep your promise, Ram. You know, you said one word, one wife, one arrow. And what happened to it? And Ram said, because I didn't want to kill you, Prabhu. That's why I didn't fire the arrow. So let's put on this garland. So he put on this garland, victory garland. And then he fought with Bali. And then Ram killed him, killed Bali. You know, shot the arrow. And then Bali started to accuse Ram of being a dharmic. He said, how could you have done this? You know, if you would have come to me, I would have brought back Sita Devi. Actually, he wouldn't have. Because he was friends with Ravan. There's that whole story, which is another Ravan story I didn't tell yesterday, that Ravan, he approached different people, and sometimes he was defeated. Like one time he approached Kartavira Arjuna, the person with 1,000 arms. And then he got captured by Kartavira Arjuna, put in jail. And later he had to make friends with Kartavira Arjuna. So the same way, one time he approached Bali. And he thought, I'm going to capture and conquer Bali. He's such a strong monkey. So Bali saw him coming, and Bali grabbed him and put him under his armpit. And he flew with him to all the holy places. Imagine being under a monkey's armpit. It's pretty disgusting. You know, that's a pretty horrible part of the body, but a monkey's armpit. That's about as bad as you can get. So he was anyway. So eventually he had to make friends with Bali, and they made a truce. They would not fight each other. So that's another reason why Bali had to be killed. So anyway, getting back to the story between Ram, the killing of Bali by Ram, Bali was accusing Ram. He said, Ram, you have acted adharmically. You hid behind a tree. And Ram said, this is not adharmic, because you have done something adharmic. You have not only kicked your brother out of the kingdom, but you have taken his wife. He was living with his wife, Ruma. So anyway, he was living with his brother's wife, and because of that, I am the representative of the king. Who is the king? The king is my brother, Bart. Bart was actually the king. He said, I'm the representative of Bart. So I'm doing it as his representative. Plus, he said, further to insult Bali, he said, plus you're a monkey. So, the rules of fair combat don't apply when dealing with monkeys. Okay. So, anyway, Ram killed Bali. All right, anyway, the different aspects of the story coming to mind as I'm telling it. And then after he killed Bali, Sugriva said, all right, let's gather together all the monkeys and help you. And he said, there's a problem. It's the Chaturmash period, the rainy season. So you'll have to wait 4 months. So Ram, being very dutiful, we're talking about duty, he was being very dutiful towards the order of his father. He decided not to go into the city, the Kishkinda, even though Kishkinda was just a monkey city. He stayed outside in the cave with Lakshman. And then, after the 4 months, he didn't hear any reply or any word from Sugriva. And he was very upset. Why hasn't this monkey kept his word? And what had happened was that Sugriva was getting drunk the whole time. And he had not only gotten intoxicated, but he actually accepted his brother's wife, Tara, and he was actually enjoying monkey life. So he had forgotten about the promise. So Ram said to Lakshman, you better find out what's happening. So Lakshman, of course, sometimes got angry. So he stormed into Kishkinda, and he said, where is this Sugriva? Let me see him immediately. And he had a bow and arrow ready drawn, ready to kill someone. And everyone was shocked. What is this? And then Sugriva heard this, and he was just like scared. So what did he do? He sent his wife out. And it's described in the Ramayan that she was completely drunk too. So her eyes were rolling. This woman, her eyes were like that. You're drunk. And she comes out, and of course Lakshman, being very dutiful, would never hurt a woman. And so he put down the weapon, and she said, don't worry, Sugriva's already sent for all the monkeys. He hadn't done it because he neglected his duty. And so he was protected by his wife, actually his brother's wife, sorry. That's actually the story. So, anyway, so that's another story in the Ramayan. Let's see what other story. We told the story of Valmiki already, told the story of the austerities, and, okay, let's tell the story about the birth of Ram, which is a very interesting story. So, King Dasarath had 3 wives. As we mentioned before, using the word sapatni, sapatna, means if you have more than one wife, that means you have enemies. So anyway, he says, don't. Be like Ram, one wife, one life, or one life, one wife. And one husband, too. No boyfriends, girlfriends. If you want to have friends, just get a pet. Like a dog or a cat. It's more dharmic. So anyway, I mean, the modern society is so crazy. They switch boyfriends and girlfriends every week. You know, when I'm preaching in the Western world, you know, some girl will come up and say, I'm really interested in Krishna consciousness. I'd like to introduce you to my boyfriend, my eternal love. And next week, she says, I'd like to introduce you to my new boyfriend, my new eternal love. And so eternity doesn't last very long nowadays. So, anyway, so just one wife, that's it, finished, boss. So, Dasarath had 3 wives, Kaikeyi, Sumitra, and Kausalya. Kausalya was the oldest. And he had no sons. Actually, he had a daughter. And her name was Shanti. But because he didn't have a son, he wasn't Shanti. You understand how it works? So, what can you do? I mean, sometimes you find people in India, they keep having children until they get a son. And they may have like 8 daughters and 1 son, and they have to figure out how to pay the dowry. In India, dowry is very important, because if you don't have a dowry, sometimes they kill you at marriage. You know, there's actually a killing. Did you hear about this? It's really heavy stuff. So, anyway, so Shanti, he thought, well, I want a son. He actually gave Shanti away to another king named Romapad, which means the king with hairy feet. But anyway, whatever. Everyone has an interesting name. Like Dasarath means 10 chariots, or fighting in 10 directions at once. Dasarath. You understand? So Romapad means, Pad means feet, Roma like hair. Hair, feet. Anyway, so. Interesting name. You got all these different interesting names in the Vedic literatures, like Durvasa means the sage with a bad face or a bad temperament. You know, who's coming today? What sannyasi is coming today? The angry sannyasi. Yeah. Can you imagine? You know, Durvasa Maharaj. So anyway, so what happened is that Dasarath was thinking, what can I do? I got to have a son. Maybe I should do an Ashvamedha sacrifice. But then his Prime Minister Sumantra advised him that he had heard previously from Sanat Kumar that he was supposed to have a Putra Kameshti ceremony performed. That means if you want a son, there's a ceremony. Just like you go to India, sometimes you see on the trees, there's all these things tied to the tree. You ever see that when you go to India? You know, people wonder, why are they tying things to the tree? Because the lady wants a son. And so the trees are filled with ribbons. And so then he said, well, there's supposed to be a Putra Kameshti ceremony, but the way to do that is you need to have someone perform the ceremony who's never seen a lady his whole life. And that's pretty hard. Because usually when you're born, you see your mother, right? Or maybe eyes are closed. But after a while, you see your mother. I mean, kids are very attached to the mother. So it turns out that there's this one sage. His name is Rishi Shringa, who's never... Rishi Shringa means the sage with deer horns on his head. And so he's never seen a woman his whole life. And the reason for that, he was the son of a man named Vibhontaka. Vibhontaka was living in the forest, very happy because he didn't have any responsibilities, you know, chanting the holy name, Haribo, Haribo. So Indra sends down one of the Heavenly Society girls named Harsha to sort of like deter him from his austerities. And Harsha comes down and says, "Hi, Vibhantaka." And he says, "No way. Get out of here." And she says, "No, if you don't give me a child, I'm going to kill myself and you'll be responsible." So he has a sort of like dilemma. He doesn't, what am I going to do? So he gives her some of his genetic material. He said, "All right, have a child," but he doesn't touch her. And so she's not really thinking like that because she wants him to fall down. And so she basically gives that to a deer. And the deer gives birth to a little boy, Rishi Shringa. So this Vibhantaka, he's so upset with women at this point. He's a real male chauvinist. I mean, you can't get worse than this. And he bans all the women from the forest, even the animals, only male cockroaches, whatever. No ladies in the forest. It's like, actually, did you know there's a place in Europe, this is interesting, it has nothing to do with the Ramayan, but it's interesting. There's a Mount Athos, it's called, where there's monasteries where by law it's illegal for women to go there. It's interesting. I'm not saying it's nice, it's actually crazy. And so then in one country in Europe, some of the brahmacharis got an idea, and they made an ashram where they had, basically there's a sign, "No women allowed within 200 meters," or something like that. They don't understand they're in the Western world. You can't do things like that. So anyway, so he was really agitated. So he wouldn't let any women close by. So that's why Rishi Shringa never saw a lady his whole life. So how to get Rishi Shringa? Well, first, Ramapad, remember the king with the hairy feet, who has Shanti as his daughter now because he got the daughter from Dasarath. So Ramapad is having a problem in his kingdom. He offended a Brahmin, there's a drought, and the only way he can get rid of the drought is to bring Rishi Shringa to his kingdom. So he has a whole plan. He calls for all the beautiful girlfriends in the kingdom, girls, prostitutes basically. And he says, you have to attract Rishi Shringa because he's never seen a woman before, so he's not going to know what he's dealing with. So the most beautiful one says, okay, give me a lot of money. And she constructs a floating island on the river with palm trees, and all these other girls there, like in Hawaii doing the hula dance or whatever. So anyway, and they float down to where the ashram of Vibhantaka is. And they wait until Rishi Shringa is alone and his father has gone out to do something. Vibhantaka, the father, has gone out to do something. And this most beautiful girl comes to the ashram, and Rishi Shringa doesn't really know it's a girl because he has no experience. So he just thinks it's a good-looking brahmachari. And so he says, please accept my obeisances, all glories to Prabhupada. No, not all glories to Prabhupada. Please accept my obeisances. And she says, well, in my country, this is how we offer obeisances. A lingana, like embracing. He says, wow, this is a better way of offering obeisances. And then she hears in the distance the father is coming back. And she thinks, I'm going to be in trouble. And so she runs away. And this boy, poor boy, his eyes are rolling in his head. The father comes back and says, what happened to you? Did you smoke marijuana or something? And he can see something's going on with his son. Something happened to bewilder him. And so he watches his son very carefully. And after a while, he goes away again. The girl comes back. She says, join us for a fire sacrifice on my islands. So they go on the islands, and they float back to Ramapad's kingdom. There's rain and everything like that. And Rishi Shringa gets married to Shanti. Nice. It's nice, isn't it? It's not the end of the story. So I got to finish the story before we greet the deities. And so what happens is that Vibhondaka gets very angry, and he's ready to destroy the whole kingdom of Romapad. But on the way back, Romapad has arranged that each and every one of his citizens will tell him that the kingdom belongs to his son, Rishi Shringa. So he's not going to, so he doesn't do anything, and he says to his son, all right, that's it. But after you have a kid, you're coming back with me. So then Dasarath and Sumantra understand that they have to bring Rishi Shringa there to perform this Putra Kameshti ceremony. So that's Rishi Shringa who performed the Putra Kameshti ceremony, and has to be performed by a person who's never seen a lady his whole life. So if any of you want to have sons, that's the methodology. Find someone in the jungle here in Fiji who's never seen a woman. I don't know if there's anyone like that. So, anyway, we'll continue the story tomorrow, because we have to greet the deities. Interesting story. All glories to His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, Ram Chandra ki jai, Lakshman ki jai, Bharat ki jai, Shatrugna ki jai, Sita ki jai, Hanuman ki jai.